Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Richard III. Today we get to hear from Lord Hastings in Act 3, Scene 4. But yesterday we were in Act 3, Scene 2, so a little bit of catching up that we have to do. Queen Elizabeth's family, Rivers and Grey and Vaughan, well, Vaughan isn't really family, but he was there. They were arrested while they were transporting the young Prince Edward to London so that he can be coronated. The young Prince Edward and his brother Richard are hanging out in the Tower until the day of coronation. It has been decided that the Queen's family, Rivers and Grey and Vaughan, have to be beheaded because Richard, Duke of Gloucester, arrested them and decided that they should be beheaded. Richard and Buckingham and Catesby are starting to build a group to sort of stage a coup and try to install Richard as the king, because as it stands, he's just supposed to be regent to Edward once Edward becomes king. But Richard obviously wants to be king instead, so he's building up like his little army of guys that are going to make it so that Richard can be king instead. And they have sent Catesby to feel out Hastings and see if Hastings will be on their side, because if Hastings will be on their side, then Stanley will be on their side, and strength in numbers, all that sort of thing. And once Catesby leaves to go talk to Hastings, Richard promises Buckingham that once he becomes king, Buckingham will become the Duke of Hereford. So Catesby goes and talks to Hastings, who is not at all upset about the fact that the Queen's family is dying, but he wants nothing to do with installing Richard on the throne. So it's decided that he needs to die. Richard and Buckingham decided if Hastings wasn't going to join them, then he's going to be beheaded. But of course, Hastings doesn't know that part yet, and he talks to a priest and he talks to a pursuivant, and he's like, oh, this is great. I'm like the right hand of Richard, and all is going well. Everything's great. And that was the end of Act 3, Scene 2. So Act 3, Scene 3, we are with the three who are about to die, Rivers and Grey and Vaughan, and they are lamenting things in their life, and they're talking about how unfair it is now that they have to die, and all that sort of thing. And they bring up the fact that Margaret cursed everybody earlier in the play. Old Margaret came in and she cursed everybody because they just sort of stood by while her husband and son were killed. So they're like, well, if the curse that she laid upon us means that we have to die now, then hopefully the curse that she laid on Hastings and Richard and Buckingham will also soon come to fruition, and then they're taken off to be killed, and that's the end of Act 3, Scene 3. So Act 3, Scene 4, we start out, and we have Hastings and Buckingham and the Bishop of Ely and maybe a couple other people, and they're like, all right, so when should we do this whole coronation thing? They're like, we basically have all the stuff ready, so how about tomorrow? And they're like, well, that's okay with all of us, but we should probably check with Richard too, but he's not here. Can somebody speak for him? And Buckingham's like, I'm not speaking for him. And they're like, what about Hastings? And Hastings is like, yeah, we're really close, so I guess if I had to speak on his behalf, I could put in his vote and then check with him later. And then Richard comes in, and he sends the Bishop of Ely to get some strawberries, like you do, and then he and Buckingham confer, and they're like, okay, Hastings is not on our side, so that's gotta go. They go off into the other room to talk for a second. The Bishop of Ely comes back with the strawberries, and then Richard and Buckingham come back in the room, and they're like, okay, just so that everybody's on the same page, what should the punishment be for people who betray Richard? And Hastings was like, well, obviously they should be beheaded, they're traitors, so they should be beheaded. And Richard's like, haha, that means you should be beheaded, because look at my arm. You withered my arm via witchcraft with the help of Queen Elizabeth's family, so you are a traitor. Off with his head. And he leaves, so now it's just Hastings is left with Lovell and Ratcliffe, just the three of them left, and Hastings has just been sentenced to die, which is a total 180 from where he thought he stood with Richard. And he says, woe for England, not a whit for me, for I too fond might have prevented this. Stanley did dream, the boar did raise our helms, and I did scorn and disdain to fly. 3 times today my footcloth horse did stumble, and started when he looked upon the tower, as loath to bear me to the slaughterhouse. Now I need the priest that spake to me. I now repent, I told the pursuivant, as too triumphing, how mine enemies today at Pomfret bloodily were butchered, and I myself secure in grace and favor. Oh, Margaret. Margaret, now thy heavy curse is lighted on poor Hastings' wretched head. So, I mean, he takes it, I guess, as well as one could take it when you thought that you were the right hand of the man who's going to be the right hand to the king, but then instantly in a second you're going to be beheaded, like right now. He's like, I should have known. I should have known that this was coming. Lord Stanley had that dream about Richard, and I blew it off. And also my horse was being weird about bringing me to the tower today. He's like, I was just bragging about how I was the right hand to Richard, and now I'm being killed. So he then also hearkens to Margaret's curse. This might be a thing, just so you know. And Lovell and Ratcliffe are like, yeah, Richard's gonna go have dinner now, and he wants your head before the time it's over. And Hastings is like, give me just one more second. They're like, come on, we gotta go. And he's like, okay, but just so you know, those of you that are taking me to die now are also probably gonna die real soon. And that brings us to the end of what a lot of versions call Act 3, Scene 4, but in the folio, Act 3, Scene 4 is about 87 years long and comprises the rest of Act 3. But in other versions, they've decided to split it up so that things like the passage of time make a little more sense. So that's where the other versions of the play end Act 3 and Scene 4, so we'll stop there. They've got Act 3, Scenes 5, 6, and 7. The folio just has Act 3, Scene 4, so we're going to get into that weird, the whole scenes don't quite match up thing for the rest of Act 3, which will be fun. But anyway, come on back and we'll find out if the rest of Margaret's curse is effective. We'll find out if this coup is effective. How is this coup going to happen? All sorts of fun craziness coming up as we continue through Richard III. I'll see you tomorrow for more. Mwah.